I'm so excited for the opportunity to watch so many incredible, talented, hardworking young people come and compete at the highest levels. These games, of course, aren't just about competition and the celebration of sport. It's also a celebration of Indigenous culture and heritage.
So Minister, your first North American Indigenous Games. Great to be here with you where you get to see some of the work and you're not in Parliament. What's it like for you to be here amongst the athletes at NEG?
Well, since I became a sport minister, and you know that reconciliation is a very big part of our government's work, so I'm really proud that the government is helping in funding and making sure that 5,000 kids can actually come together and compete against each other, but at the same time share about their culture and language. But it's also making the appropriate changes so that sport is overall more inclusive and removing barriers so that different communities, but for sure Indigenous communities as well, have access to sport.
Another big part of your work is safe sport.
Yeah.
How do you put in practice infrastructure for safe sport that makes sense and are tailored to specifically Indigenous athletes and Indigenous communities?
Talking about safe sport, it's a pretty broad definition. There's everything in there about abuse and maltreatment. What we're trying to do is bring diversity at the decision-making table. For Hockey Canada, for example, when they renewed their board, there's now an Indigenous person that sits on the board and that can talk about the place that hockey holds in the First Nations communities and traditions. So I think it's making all organizations grow and get better.
You mentioned abuse and maltreatment, and Human Rights Watch has said among developing countries, it's quite high in Canada in relation to others. You've been entrenched in the work.
Yeah.
It's not unique to one sport. Why do you think that is? How did we get to that place?
Well, I think that in Canada, athletes now feel safe to come forward with their stories. I think that this is something major that has changed, the fact that people feel free to talk.
A lot of the conversation about national sports organizations has been negative, but you see the scorecards. Who's doing well? Where are there some positive stories?
I think across the board there's a lot of positive work being done right now. All the new policies that we've implemented, all our national sport bodies have to get on board. So when we're talking about signing with the Office of the Sport Integrity Commissioner, which is a big step, all of our national sport bodies have now signed, which means that all of our national athletes now have somewhere to turn to and make sure that sport is being done in the proper way.
And lastly, you mentioned culture.
Yeah.
And that sports culture in our country. You're balancing multiple things. You want to have civic pride and win medals and high performance. You want to have health and wellness at the community level. And you want to have events like this where we can learn about different cultures and potentially have reconciliation through sport. From the government on down, how do we balance those different objectives, which sometimes don't necessarily work in concert?
I think they should work in concert, from being kids to young adults performing on the international stage, and that their entire well-being is being taken into account every day and every step of the way. So it's a matter of making sure that there's proper training, education, and prevention out there to give the best care to our athletes and give them everything that they need to strive as athletes, but afterwards also as citizens and leaders, because that's what a lot of sports people become. It's a change that's happening right now, but it's for the better, for sure.